Hi guys, everyone. Today I read the book The End of the Civil Book, written by David Dreyer. Okay, let's go. The end of the war. The end had come. It was earlier spring 1865, and General Robert E. Lee realized that his exhausted Confederate army could do no more. Although Lee had said that he would rather die 1,000 deaths than surrender, he now saw no alternative. The military forces of the Union had defeated those of the South. On April 9, Lee donned a fresh uniform. He rode wearily on his horse to meet U.S. General Ulysses S. Grant at a private home in the town of Appomattox Courthouse, Virginia. He arrived at the house and sat down to wait. Half an hour later, the U.S. commander made his appearance, clad in an old uniform spattered with mud. The two generals engaged in friendly conversation, then got down to the business of ending the war, slavery, and the Union. In the decades leading up to the Civil War, the nation was ruled by divisions between North and South. Many people had doubted that the United States would survive intact. Slavery had become an important division. The North was a region of expanding industry and small farms, with large-scale agriculture playing a lesser part in the economy. Also, slavery had existed in the North. All northern states had outlawed the practice by 1804. The South was a much different world, an agricultural society dominated by the production of cotton. Southern plantation owners had chosen to use the labor of enslaved people since it was the cheapest way to cultivate and harvest cotton. By the mid-1800s, nearly 4 million Africans had been kidnapped and forced under threat or died to work free in the southern states. They were forced to do many jobs, but most lived and worked on cotton plantations. The freedom denied. Enslaved people on plantations typically lived in squalid housing and endured cruel and inhuman treatment by their enslavers. During the same period, Northern abolitionists, anti-slavery activists were denouncing human bondage in the South. With disagreement over slavery brought a second issue into focus: states' rights. The Fugitive Slave Act of 1815 50 was a federal law that made a fugitive from one state a fugitive in every state. It also squared people in 3 states to return anyone who had escaped slavery to the enslavers. Yet some Northerners helped people who had escaped slavery instead. Northern juries, in turn, sometimes refused to convict those who violated the act. Still, the Civil War might never have happened if the United States had remained a small collection of states in the eastern part of the continent during the 1800s. However, the nation was expanding into huge territories to the west that were forcibly taken from native peoples who had lived there for thousands of years. Those territories were becoming states, and Congress had to decide whether new states would allow slavery. The southern states want to keep a rough balance between states that allowed slavery and free states. They didn't want southern representatives to be outnumbered in Congress, resulting in a loss of political power of the South. That balance was maintained for several decades through a series of congressional compromises for the celebration of new states. But tensions between North and South were growing. Those tensions reached the breaking point with the U.S. presidential election of November 1860. To South dismay, Abraham Lincoln, candidate for the anti-slavery Republican Party, was elected president of the United States. The South states feared a Republican-led government would destroy the economy and put an end to the practice of slavery. After the election, 7,000 states, South California, Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas, seceded from the Union. In February 1861, they officially formed the Confederate States of America, which they hoped could be a permanent nation separate of the United States. The war began in April 1861 in Charleston, South California. The Confederacy considered Fort Sumter, a Union fortification in Charleston, happened to be a foreign presence in its territory on April 12. After Fort Sumter's Union commander refused to surrender the fort, the Confederate forces bombarded it for other southern states Virginia, Arkansas, North California, and Tennessee. Then also succeeded and joined the Confederacy. Most Southerners excluded at the coming of the war. No one in the South or the North had any idea how terrible the war would be. Waging total war. In the first 2 years of the war, little went well for the Union President, and Lincoln was beleaguered by one incompetent general after another. The Union was able to claim a victory of sorts in the Battle of Antietam in Maryland on September 17 and 1862. That battle resulted in terrible casualties on both sides, but the North counted the battle as a victory because its forces, General Lee, the commander of the Confederate Army, to retreat to Virginia. The victory also enabled Lincoln to issue the Emancipation Proclamation, which granted freedom to enslaved people in the Confederacy. When the war began, Lincoln's main goal had been to save the U.S. United States as a unified country. Now he began to think about the end slavery in all the states once and for all. Antietam might have been more of a genuine Northern triumph if the commanding Union General George B. McClellan had followed Lincoln's order to pursue Lee and destroy his army. McClellan always had an hesitant officer in not the order. However, an exasperated Lincoln relieved McClellan of his command in November 1862 and replaces him with a Bruce Burnside, who could be even worse. The war brought on and casualty mountain in December 1862. The North suffered a disastrous defeat at the Battle of Fredericksburg in Virginia. The losses conferred by Union forces under Burnside's command were staggering. One Union surveyor recalled that men felt like leaves in autumn. It seemed miraculous that any of us escaped at all. By the battle's end, more than 12,500,000 Union men were killed, wounded, or missing. The cries of the wounded, one man said, were, "Wait, unearthly, terrible to hear, and the bear." A turning point in the war came in July 1863 with the Battle of Gettysburg in Pennsylvania. Union forces, now under the command of General George Meade, won a decisive victory over Lee's forces After this battle, Lee was never again able to invade the North, and from then on the Confederacy was now on the defensive, but again consolidates were hurrying those about 50 million, including as many as 28 million on the southern side. What's more, Meade, like Mackenzie Gallen, failed to follow up his victory by pursuing Lee's army. As the war dragged on, Northern sentiment against the fighting grew. In 1864, General M.C. Gallen was the Democratic candidate for president. The Democratic platform called for a cessation for fighting and a negotiated end to the war. The 1864 election would determine the world direction of the war, and Lincoln believed he would lose. Instead, Lincoln won. Re-election gave him a mandate war in order to unite the country and end slavery. In January 1865, Congress passed the 13th Amendment, which ended slavery in the United States except as a punishment for crime. In addition, Lincoln finally had the generals he needed. Ulysses S. Grant and William Tecumseh Sherman. Those two commanders were professional and effective. They sought to destroy the Confederacy and end the war as quickly as possible. Sherman's campaign took him through the Deep South. In late 1864, after burning much of Atlanta, his men marched across the state of Georgia. They torn up rail lines, destroyed bridges, and set fire to many homes. Meanwhile, to the north, Grant had been waging a relentless campaign against Lee. One particularly horrible battle took place in mid-1864 at Cold Harbor, Virginia. Grant ordered an attack on strongly and changed Confederate lines that causes some 7,000 Union casualties in 20 minutes. One Union soldier later said, "This wasn't war, but murder." Such bloodshed caused many in the North to denounce the Union commanders as Grant the Butcher. Nonetheless, Grant was wearing down Lee's army. In early 1865, he had Lee bottled up in trenches outside of Petersburg, Virginia. The South surrenders before dawn in April 3. Lee abandoned Petersburg with the remnants of his army. He knew that staying there any longer would spell doom. Let hope to link up with another Confederate army marching north from Tennessee. In his diary, Onion Brevet Jacob has recounted the events of that day, when his Confederacy was verging on collapse. Has said he was awakened early on the morning of April 3 to a terrible shock of the earth, which he soon learned was caused by Lee's men blowing up their stores of gunpowder before fleeing Petersburg. A bit later, he wrote, Union troops took over the town with great rejoicing. The air was filled with thousands of voices all cheering and the band playing Yankee Doodle. Lee's retreating army was doggedly pursued of Union forces. Grant was determined that Lee would not escape. On April 6, Grant's army inflicted about 8,000 casualties on the Confederates. Lee saw the surrender was the only reasonable option after 4 bloody years. The Civil War was coming to an end. Grant and Lee met on April 9 at a private home in town of Appomattox Courthouse, Virginia. At the historic meeting, Grant offered generous terms of the for the South's surrender. He allowed all Confederate soldiers to return their homes and agreed that Lee's troops could keep their horses and mules. Because Lee's men were nearly starving, Grant ordered 25,000 food rations for them. Other Confederate forces in the South had not yet given up the fight, but they all soon surrendered. On April 2, Confederate President Jefferson Davis fled Richmond and Confederate capital on May 10. He was captured and would spend 2 years in prison. The Civil War was over. The Asian nation of President Lincoln. The United States remained united, yet North's joy over its victory in the war soon turned back to mourning. On April 14 and 18, 65, a man whose name would soon be known throughout the nation, John Wilkes Booth, gained entrance to the Lincoln's private box at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. As the president and his wife Mary sat watching a play, Booth fired a single shot into Lincoln's head and then jumped down the stage. The unconscious Lincoln was taken across the street to a private house. He died early the next morning. Booth was an actor and Southern sympathizer. He was also part of the group conspirators who sought revenge for the defeat of the Confederacy. They planned to kill not only Lincoln but also Vice President Andrew Johnson and Secretary of State William Seward. As it turned out, only Nikon was assassinated, though Seward received serious knife wounds. Onion tubes Chuck Booth and a fellow conspirator, David Harold, to a farm in Virginia. Booth was shot to death, and Harold was taken prisoner. Harold and other conspirators were later tried for their crimes. Four of them, including Harold, were found guilty and hanged. Nikon's body was transported by a funeral train back to his home state of Illinois. He was buried in Springfield, the city where he had practiced law before entering politics. Although Lincoln was gone, he lived long enough to achieve his main goals: the preservation of the Union and an end to slavery. The legacy of the Civil War. The end of the Civil War also began the next chapter in history of the United States. By December 6, 1865, the 13th Amendment, which ended slavery, had been ratified by enough states to become law. Within the next 5 years, two additional amendments, the 14th and 15th, were passed, giving formerly enslaved people civil rights and voting rights. Okay, goodbye and see you again. Bye.